Now, when I was building it, I like the idea that building the piece, you build it and if you have enough time, and at that time I was sort of energetic enough to go through this process, you can let the specific little images sort of formulate themselves in the context of what it is that you're doing. And I like that. I like that way of working, so that you're not stuck with a completely predetermined order or sequence of events.
I think that Bob really had a feeling for time, yes. That I think is one of his most essential things. Especially for slow time. And the performances featured very often slow time. Time that was on the verge of being boring. And of course it gets that slow that you begin to feel it.
And before you entered into the little bays, and I don't remember if there was an entrance. I think we led people into a dark entrance and then into their bays. As you came in, just to your left, the whole wall was this, I guess, bas-relief stapled and hammered and glued of paper, and it was like an abstract expressionist collage with some feeling of trashy. No, maybe not. No, because it was all clean paper, I think, but crumpled and colors and so that was like an installation that you saw before you were led in through the dark tunnel into your bays and into this experience. Membranes that rolled down and had little bits of paper taped to them, little square pieces taped, but not, real regularly, but regularly, and that caught the image of the same costumes that they'd seen in the indoor performance. They were now to see them in the 8mm projections. I felt a connection with the woods in those in that little movie.
I felt it was scary, a little scary, threatening in these cubbies, in being these little like cubby holes, and particularly since I lived above it with this little kid and things, I was concerned with fire and all that kind of stuff. It was all done out of paper and crap that he always had, rags and stuff, and I thought it was a menacing piece in a way.
But that, of course, added to the tension. And I think that tension was a very important part of these performances. Bob had has a way of transporting you, and he puts you into a space, and then he makes that space very different from the space that you normally experience, and then then he has a kind of tendency to produce what looks like hallucinations and hallucinatory figures, and sometimes animal, sometimes human, and as I say, metamorphic figures. So I would say on the whole that his approach is extremely poetic in that way, which is a kind of a banal thing to say, but it's that kind of a performance.
Now remember these forms that were in the central space beginning to move like this. There were two things that got pulled up and moving around in the space, like, as I say, I call them puppets or something, this big thing. And there was another ball-shaped mouth person scurrying around in the space.
And then Bob cleared it out and built those series of places where we stood, and then we all came into the middle of this corridor and looked up. There's that one wonderful photograph where we're all looking up like that, where Lucas is floating. And I thought part of the beauty of the photograph was everybody's head.
There was a swing, maybe a foot or two above the audience, which was assembled at the bottom in pitch darkness. And I had to climb on the swing vertically, horizontally, and just swing motionless. Then the lights went on, and there was this slight shock with the audience that something was hanging on top of them. I don't think I did anything. And then the lights went black again, and I got up.
I think one of the things was that, as I say, you were claustrophobic. You were trapped in a situation which was threatening, and that was a sense of danger. Or something might happen, like the swing I mentioned being cut down, and that was dangerous. There was a kind of an edge of danger there, but it was a fictional, though it was a very intimate experience, let's say. And if Bob had a tendency to increase the intimacy, I would say, by wrapping people in space.
Open up the space and close it down in one way or another. I remember at one point that these tunnels, the roofs kind of opened up a little bit. I mean, as much as we could with ropes and pulleys. And you can do a lot of other things too. You know, you have noises that are exterior to the place. All of a sudden there's something out there. It's different from what's in here.
In the American Moon, there was one movement where I had to get, and we both did it. We had to get like to the floor, flat as a board, but up on our hands and with our, let's say our ankle like this, so that we were up on our toes like this, and then the body flat, and then on our hands like this. And we had to, at surprising intervals, we had to hop. It felt kind of like being a water strider on the surface of a stream or something. So we were like, and what did he call it? Heaping. He said, you heap around. And so I'd heap around and he'd heap around, and we'd be these like bug-like things. But all I knew was the kind of timing he wanted. So I'd time it on my own. He would tell his performers what he wanted, but then we'd color it in. When we would appear as people visible to the audience, we were carrying out some necessity most of the time. I mean, rolling across like logs, rolling over each other wasn't a necessity, but crossing to pull a cord was a necessity.
It was like a force of nature that didn't have a name. It may have come from myth or some ancient sort of ritualistic thing, but it didn't have this connection with ordinary life, the strange shape versus another strange shape. In the center of the round space, as I said, surrounded by these caves, he had made out of plastic, clear plastic, huge pieces. He had glued them together and made a kind of a whale shape, only it was also like a balloon, but in a huge, like a whale. But it was like a jellyfish. And I have a vision of him or Anita Baker, who was the owner of the Grubengarten, using the back of a vacuum cleaner to sort of, project the air into things. Then he finally got into a certain shape. And he had me on one side, lying down on the floor, sort of reclining. And then on the other side, Simone Forte. And the balloon was sort of pressing on us, sort of, so that the whole thing was covered. And then he was standing, so he got to the middle of the balloon, and then sort of went on top of it. So from our point of view, he looked like flying. But from the other point of view, it's like he was sort of plunging into this semi-soft, yet blubbery kind of thing.
And then, of course, that wonderful ending with Lucas. He, of course, was a very, 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 kind of parachuting down in this swing over the heads of all the audience who at that point left the bays and stood in the middle and looked upwards.
There was a nice feeling afterwards. Cooking something for you, and that's it. You eat it and it's over, and you can't, you know, you've had it, you enjoyed it, and just be happy that you were in its presence, you know. It evaporated after the event. It wasn't as if you made a performance and then you had the costume and then you could, you know, do it again. No, it was destroyed. It was over. It didn't exist anymore. So, you know, like drawing with smoke or something. Even with Pollock, you know, it's something very delicate, but you have the painting and you see the delicacy. But with Whitman's, it was like, it was just there for the second and then it was going to be gone.